We are live. I'm so excited to have you, Ben. It's not every day I get to have another Ben on the podcast.
Good to be here. Yeah, this is going to be a tough one for me.
I think you can, Mark. You can give me a nickname if you'd like. We could just call it Ben, or you can use the Ben E. So it's up to you. Okay.
Yeah,
Although
Benny.
Ben G sounds cooler.
Yeah, Benji and Benny. It's pretty
Uh,
good. We'll figure something out.
We'll figure it out. Well, cool. I've been really excited to have this conversation. Some context, both for the three of us to kind of get into the same headspace as well as for the audience listening is OpenClaw, which was like Claudebot, which Moltbot, this kind of, call it the scramble for people to buy Mac minis and have AI agents running on their Mac minis and doing all kinds of stuff for them is very trendy, let's say right now. I personally have not bought a Mac mini. I think Mark did, but I've been following that trend. And then while everyone was like discussing it, someone, I forget, I think it might have been David Spiegel, if I'm not mistaken, who pinged me and Mark that we should take a look at what Zo is building. So sounds like I jumped in before Mark. Mark was out playing with his Mac Mini and stuff, but I was like, nah, I'm going to skip that. I'm going to go straight to like whatever. This Zo thing looks kind of interesting. And then I started playing with the product, and my understanding of what it was and kind of like the use case that kind of I found compelling, and that's actually made me a sticky user that keeps coming back to Zo so far, is Zo's this like computer in the cloud. So I'm almost imagining people should think of it as on the file side, like a Google Drive in a sense, like a bunch of files and subfiles and folders. But you've built in things that I think of belonging in like a Claude type product into the computer. So there's like skills, and there's like chat, like an agentic chat, and there's different models, and there's like a concept of memory that you could piece together. And then you also have elements that I thought of as belonging in something like a Zapier kind of workflow, which is like scheduled tasks and cron jobs or Google Apps Script type kind of cron jobs that can run. And so it all kind of comes together into this like computer with storage and processing power and built-in AI chat capabilities and the ability to text it and email it into one system. And I thought that was really compelling. So the first thing I did and that I've been using is, after every one of these podcasts, we have someone that helps us with this podcast take a transcript of the episode and put it in Google Drive in a very specific place with a very specific naming pattern. And what would always happen is she would ping us when that was ready, and then I would go into Claude and I would brainstorm some episode titles. So I was like, and then once we land on episode titles, I would start to think about how I'm going to talk about that episode when I publish about it on LinkedIn. So what I've had my Zo doing for me for the last probably 4 or 5 weeks is listening every day, going into Google Drive and checking whether there's an updated transcript that's like an increment from the last one that we worked on together. And then if it detects it, I want it to pull it in, ingest it, and then generate a folder for that episode that has 2 files in it. One file for potential episode title names and one file for potential ideas for a post based on the conversation, and then to like email me when that's done. And if there's no new transcript on a given day, it still emails me saying no new transcript detected. So that's kind of been my initial, entryway into the Zo world. And Mark's been seeing like the titles it's generating. They've been taking like a tiny amount of time for me to edit them, but I would say I'm getting pretty good leverage for that initial use case. Mark, you look like
Ben,
you have something to say.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm just learning about this now. And I think my guilt of always being the second one to add titles is a little bit of relief now. But yeah, that's amazing. I had no idea. And yeah, I thought the title process was more manual, but I'm glad that Steve is out, and clearly Ben has gotten really good at prompting because the titles are always really strong.
Well, what I did is I built 2 separate skills inside of Zo. One skill is for, basically coming up with title ideas. By the way, Ben, you're going to talk in this conversation too. It's not just the two of us riffing. But the first skill is like extracting the episode title names, and then this is all very meta when we publish about this because this process will be running for this conversation. And then the second skill is about taking something that is coming up with ideas for posts. And then there's a third skill that will come into play when I'm actually ready to pick one of those ideas, which is called the Ben voice transformer skill. And that's something that, Ben, I think in our first chat, we talked about how I created what's called a data set in Zo where I took all of my historical LinkedIn posts, I'm pretty sure.
Mm,
It might have been my LinkedIn or my Substack. I'm forgetting which. It might have been the Substack. I'm forgetting. I have two different data sets, I think, in Zo. But anyways, I pulled it in and I created this voice transformer that can take any post that I'm playing with, and Zo can turn it into something that sounds like me for that final post. So anyways, that's all a long way of saying, like, that's the context through which I know Zo and where people might think about Zo. So my question for you is, like, how did you get pulled into this, like, direction of building something like this computer in the cloud that has AI built into it?
it's a great question. We've actually been at this for a while now. We started our company actually as an inference platform, but in particular, this was in 2023. We were building an agentic inference platform, which was kind of before agents were really a thing. But we saw that, like, when you use LLMs in concert with computers, they're much more capable and they can do a lot of things when you kind of let them run and execute code in a sandbox. So we had this inference platform that kind of strangely like combined kind of running open source models with kind of like letting you kind of like execute code in a sandbox or like use vector databases, basically use all these tools. And it was very early days back then. These LMs were not very good, but they could still do quite a lot. So I think as we were building this business, which was B2B, very different from Zo, we just realized that the next generation of developers who we were building for is really going to be everybody. Like this technology fundamentally like democratizes the ability to kind of like write and run and deploy code. So we made the difficult decision to pivot the product into this thing that is now Zo. We started Zo about a year ago, early last year, quite a long time before the OpenClaw craze. We were kind of like doing something quite akin to OpenClaw, and took it a lot further, I guess, than even kind of where OpenClaw landed, in that you get all of this stuff built in, all of this useful functionality. You get a really nice, well-designed workspace, and you can even like host sites and stuff, which is, I guess, one thing that Ben didn't mention. But because Zo is like not just a computer, but like a computer in the cloud, it has these properties where you get this home on the internet, and you can kind of host things on the internet, either like websites or endpoints, APIs for yourself or for your friends. So that's kind of like the bigger picture of Zo. Really awesome to hear this use case, though. It's awesome that you're actually using data sets as well for your voice. That's really cool.
Yeah, I'm kind of like I love. I'm a student of the game of business and
Yeah,
distribution, and I'm really curious to hear your point of view on the like whole open claw like just story, right? Because like as
yeah,
someone who like wait like I've been doing this for a year or like
yeah,
6 months or 8 months, and then you see like the crazy splash and impact that they have, like
yeah.
it seems like in a weird way it was like this like perfect storm. But like why do you think like they were able to like that idea was able to catch fire so much, compared to like I'm sure like there's Zoe, there's probably other people that
Yeah,
are kind of
totally.
building similar concepts. So what was it special there?
Yeah, I mean, props to them for sure. OpenClaw is awesome, and they've really like created this movement. And I think fundamentally, this kind of like idea of ownership has been like a big part of the movement and community, because it's kind of like this big open source project that's been really awesome. And I think the kind of like this big movement of like people doing kind of what looks like pretty crazy stuff with their computers, I think is a big part of it. They feel like kind of created this kind of like very memeable thing, in many ways. Like people like, having their claws like open, like order DoorDash for them, or like even just like having like a physical like Mac mini, like where your thing is running, is like kind of very compelling and tangible. So yeah, I think it's very cool what they've done, and they've like really appealed to this kind of like tinkerer, like kind of hacker audience, that I think is really kind of central to just the history of computing in general. If you look at like the homebrew computer club from way back and before the personal computer really existed, it was probably much like the OpenClaw movement that's happening. Just a bunch of people like working with these raw parts and trying to figure out where things are going. So I'm a huge fan of everything that's going on. I think it's been really good for us. People really understand what Zo is now. It doesn't take all of this explanation of what it's useful for.
Yeah, and what would you say? Because I think like the sense that I get, especially talking to like operators that have a full time job, that maybe don't have the luxury to be tinkering all day. It's like there's almost like this like fatigue of like you're always catching up. You're always like kind of like trying to get your breath back, and like
Yeah,
oh like shit, like 6 months ago I just started like using like Claude, and ChatGPT for
Yeah.
everything. Then I recently started using like Cloud Code, and it's been amazing. And like it's enabled me to be more productive and build these things. And then like, it seems like this is like the next frontier of almost like agentic workflows. And it's kind of like maybe in the background is a lot of like the same underlying technology, but like it's like enabling some new use cases. So like, what's your like, maybe what's your kind of like pitch, or how would you like encourage someone like who's like an operator to be like, hey, like why should I maybe move away from something like, or like why should I supplement my use case of Cloud Code or Codex and do something like, you know, OpenClaw or Zo, or like, you know, like these new kind of like almost virtual computers, or or in some cases physical computers and that have agents in it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think the main reason is just curiosity. I think like this is kind of where things are going, and this is very much the frontier. I think most people have not been exposed to like a computer that works this way, and I think it's very cool once you kind of realize the potential, and it really feels just like a computer, and in like how malleable and like how many things you can do with it. Like there really is kind of like no limit to what's possible with kind of this kind of computer in the cloud with an agent on it. And yeah, I think it really like is an exercise for your creativity to kind of like figure out how to kind of utilize that for your work. But it, I think, can start really simple, and it can start with these kind of like living workflows, like kind of what Ben mentioned in the beginning. These kinds of like repetitive tasks that you know how to do that you could very easily prompt an agent to do, and you just want it to kind of run in the background or like on a schedule. I think that's a very nice way to get started. I think another thing about things like Claude Code or like kind of many tools is um, often it's like a little difficult to figure out how to post something, like how to like get like a hosted website or an API. You can use various services like kind of like Vercel or what have you, but often you don't get this like very simple kind of like tangible experience of something being hosted directly on your own server, which is kind of what Zo gives you. And I think that is like maybe part of like the learning experience of kind of like learning how to like work with kind of the cloud is like realizing that you have your own home on the internet. You don't have to use somebody else's home or service. You can just directly serve a website or anything you want or a file just from your own kind of cloud, from your own server. In a sense, what we're trying to do with Zo is like trying to give people a new category of personal device, which is the personal cloud. And I think it's a very useful thing that will be something that all of us have in the future. We have like a very primitive version, maybe through like Dropbox or iCloud right now, but the real cloud is like, you know, what software engineers use at tech companies. And I think over time, like regular people will have the same kind of capabilities of a software company.
So do you think people will still, so they'll still want to have their repo in a place like GitHub, but instead of maybe deploying through Vercel, hosting through on Vercel, they'd want to host it on their own personal cloud? Is that the idea?
Yeah, I think that's right. You also like GitHub is great for collaboration, but if you're just doing kind of solo work, which is a lot of what kind of personal projects are, you don't really need GitHub either. You can just host the code on your server inside of Zo and host it directly from Zo as well. Which
Do you get things like commit history by working that way?
Definitely, yeah. As Zo will set up Git repo just inside of Zo, and you'll get all the same benefits. Obviously, GitHub is nice if you want to like collaborate or like look at the UI and look at the code. But yeah,
yeah. And what's cool about that, just to so the way I think people can be, the way I think at least about this type of product is, it does like you said this, but it's like it's a new way of thinking about a computer, right? I think most of us think about a computer as like our MacBook or whatever. There's a screen and there's like a keyboard and there's like a trackpad and there's like a bunch of storage and RAM, and then it's got Wi-Fi, and then I can use a bunch of applications that are connected to the Wi-Fi, and that's basically what a computer is. And then do some stuff locally, obviously, too, offline. But once you start to play with a product like Zo, and I can't speak for OpenClaw, but I'm sure a lot of this applies there too, is like you start to realize there's things that can be connected that historically were not able to be connected. So when you were just describing like your own personal computer in the cloud, your own cloud, where you host your own like repo and publish to your own website, and then knowing you could text that.
Exactly.
You could text the computer to do something. You could text or you could email the computer to do something. There's a world in which you look at your website and you could just voice dictate a note into an email about all the things that you want to change about it. send that email to your Zo computer account, I guess is what you call it. I think I have my own email address, like my own Zo computer email address. And so I could like email that, or I can just text it if I'm out and about on a walk.
Yeah.
And then it will go and it will be able to like make all those changes to the website and even quote unquote deploy.
Yeah.
While I'm just through an email conversation or through a text conversation without me ever having to go into like an IDE or anything like that.
Exactly.
And then I should be able to like just refresh the browser and see the changes actually like on production, and you could connect your own domain names and all that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, so it's like you start thinking about these like ways of working that are just literally not possible historically when you play with it. And I hope this isn't coming off as like like us promoting like, by the way, like this is not a paid episode promoting Zo, but I think this category of product is just so fascinating because it's literally forcing me to think of in new ways about how I work.
Totally. Yeah. On the other side of that, you can also have Zo text you, which is also kind of a fun interaction. And there's this free dive instructor who is a power user of Zo. She's totally non-technical, doesn't even use Claude Code, but she has this integration that she just asks Zo to set up where like people can enter their phone number, and then Zo will set up like a group text thread with her and that person, which is pretty great. And also like quite hard to do. Like she would probably have to learn how to use Zapier or something to have figured that out before. And she was just using Squarespace before, but now it's on Zo.
Do you know where people... I actually tried doing something in Zo recently, and I realized there's no Google Sheet integration. I'm sure that's on your roadmap, but like I wanted to kick off a workflow if something happened in a Google Sheet, and I don't think that's quite available yet.
It might actually be possible. It should be possible. So through the Google Drive connection, you can have Zo access a Google Sheet. And I guess if you wanted to monitor that Google Sheet, you could probably set up a scheduled task to check it every once in a while.
But you can't write to the Google Sheet, right?
You can also write to it. Yeah.
Okay, well, I might have to go offline with you after this and chat, because I went back and forth and I was like, actually, at first Zo was like, I do have the ability to do that. I'm like, great, like let's do it. And then
interesting.
I was like,
I was confused.
It was a little. It seemed like to go back and forth on what it could or couldn't do, which is, that problem's just going to go away over time. But today, I think sometimes AI agents tell me they can do something that they can't because something in the way that they're looking up the capabilities is off or outdated, which is a separate problem. But
totally.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like, to me, honestly, is like the hardest part about this modality in general, because I think if you're someone who's already a power user of like Claude Code and you're very comfortable with command line and deploying things, right? Like Ben and I are part of this other group chat with other product people, and I think they're talking about like kind of different people using OpenClaw, and like Ben was like, hey, like I'm just like curious, like what are some use cases that you guys are getting value out of this new modality? And my answer was like, honestly, like nothing new yet. Just because like there's just, I'm already kind of like a power user of like, like I already have cron jobs and like GitHub actions for a lot of these things that I have on a daily basis for reports and briefs and stuff like that. But I also think there's like another part that's like, man, like, especially for like projects like OpenClaw, and I think that's probably like a huge opportunity for Zo. It's like the setup is super hard. Like it's not easy. Like to get it to work consistently and like to have like remember things. Like it just, I think people on X just hype it, and I said this is a life-changing thing, but don't really talk about like all the work you need to do and how often it fails and how like janky it can be. And I think part of the other thing that's tricky from my point of view too is that because like you have so many options, right? Like the use cases that are almost endless. So like I think like I was thinking like, okay, like if I could do something differently when I started using this new kind of form of computing or agent, is that I wish I came in with like a very opinionated thing. Like here is the problem that I'm hoping to solve, because I actually think would have gotten to value much faster than just like, hey, like I know I should be playing with this, and now I'm gonna go fish for use cases, which again is like what good versus bad
it's a
product
solution in
managers do.
search of a problem.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not sure how you're thinking about that in terms of like onboarding people or like
totally. It's hard because like you can take so many different paths, similar to when you get a new laptop. You can do really anything with it, but then again there are like all these like little onboarding flows in your laptop. And there's even like the Apple Genius kind of bar and program. But I think this new kind of agent with a computer, like a personal agent, it's a new thing. And I think like these days, I like to think about AI as kind of like a horse, and hence our logo. It's kind of it's not non sequitur, but I'll get back there. So like a horse, it like can help you like go much further and explore like different lands than you would have otherwise. But
That horse
also
has
takes like
wings too, right?
yeah, our horse has wings. It lives in the cloud, right? So it's a cloud computing horse.
Pegasus.
But it's related to like this bicycle for the mind idea, right? It's like a living bicycle, hence a horse. So like it's different from bicycle. It's not just this kind of like mechanical object that gives you some leverage. It's a living object that gives you leverage, and you have to like build a relationship with it, figure out the ins and outs of like this particular horse, and I guess it takes some training, I guess some personal training to kind of like get it to this like place where it really feels like kind of extension of you, a kind of partner in life. I think that's kind of like the best experience for like kind of a very lived in kind of like personal agent. Like my Zo like has all of the stuff that is really useful, and it feels a lot like a computer now. But it's this living being that like kind of does some things as well on its own, which is always fun to watch. Yeah.
What have you found any use cases for yourself personally that make you just almost like as a user of Zo, just
Yeah.
like really happy that it exists? I'm sure there are, but I'm just curious what they
Yeah,
are.
no, totally. I think that I don't know if there's a word for this term or this feeling, but when you build something for yourself, even if you just prompted it, you feel something for that thing that you built. Like you feel an attachment to it. You feel more joy in some ways when you use it. So I get that feeling a lot nowadays when I do different things, when I use my Zo tools. So like one example is like I had to like share some documents. So I made a little system to like basically build a version of DocSend, where like I would basically like get email verification for the person before they viewed the doc, and then they would get like a link to view it. That's been super useful, because like, you have to send little docs to people all the time. And I like to have like a little bit of tracking over when that happens sometimes. So that's been really nice. And like, I feel really good about like, making the UI a little better over time, or like, making like new features. So it's like very easy to do this. I'm just talking to Zo. I haven't really looked at the code at all, but yeah, I have a bunch of little tools like that I'm proud of. They're just for me. They're like one of one tools, but they give me a lot of joy, a lot more joy, I think, than I would have gotten from just like using DocSend myself.
So
Yeah,
to make sure I'm understanding correctly, so
yeah,
it sounds like basically the way you're using in this case, the product is you actually use it to build kind of like your own personal SaaS version of
yeah,
DocSend, and prioritizing maybe the use cases or the pain points that you wanted to solve, which was like, hey, like I would love to have a little bit more information or data around
yeah,
who's looking at the documents and how often maybe they're looking at different pages and all that stuff, and just have access to the analytics myself. And is it fair to assume that the way you're building this tool, is it like you can just do it from your phone, you're texting with it, and then once you have an idea, it kind of like shows the change, you like it, you can
yeah.
ship it into production, and all of this is hosted in your Zo computer basically?
Exactly. Yeah. And that element of it is important as well, that you can kind of just text it. So like often I will just have these like shower thoughts, or like I'll have a thought that comes to me, and I can kind of like iterate on these things now in the background, like just by like texting Zo without like kind of like being like in like I'm working on this project mode. I can just have these like little parallel threads. Sometimes they go somewhere, sometimes they don't, but I just am accumulating all this stuff inside of my Zo that kind of becomes useful to me over time. Yeah. So it's kind
How do you organize those shower thoughts? Like, let's say today you end up with like three
of,
different unrelated ideas that you want to track. Like, do you just
yeah.
open the Zo iMessage like kind of app, and each time you have one of those ideas, you just say hey, like new idea, this thing. Like, what's your workflow?
Yeah. So I'm more messy, I would say. I kind of like to let Zo organize things, and just see how that goes. And it has gone like fairly well. Sometimes I will like ask Zo to like reorganize or like explain to me what the structure is, but I try not to look at my kind of files too much and just like let Zo manage them. Yeah. So I like, I save articles to Zo all the time. This is like one like very common thing that I do is I'll like just send a URL to Zo over iMessage that I like want to read later or want a summary of. Sometimes I'll ask it to like do some additional research, and it'll like put that somewhere. And sometimes I'll like ask more about that. And yeah, it feels much more malleable, also definitely messier and squishier than kind of like my previous like workflow using like Pocket or these other like kind of web clipping tools.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so just to make sure I'm clear on that, and for those who haven't played with the product yet, it's not like you have like a bunch of different iMessage chats with Zo. There's one
Yeah.
Zo contact, so you message it
Yeah.
just like you message a human in your life. And I have actually gone back to message Zo about things that are non sequiturs. So like I'll message
Mhm.
Zo about one thing, and then I'll message it about something else in the same exact thread, and it kind of understands the context. So is that kind of when you say you come back and kind of like iterate on ideas? Do you literally voice dictate using like Whisperflow or like Willow? Like, what's your process
Yeah.
for like picking up an idea that you haven't thought about in like a week while you're on a walk and just asking Zo to like do something new with it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I still have to be pretty precise about that particular thing so Zoe knows what I'm talking about. But yeah, sometimes I send Zoe a voice memo, and sometimes I use
Hmm.
the built-in like voice dictation is a little suboptimal on iOS, and I have the Whisperflow app, which is a little better. But I kind of like the ergonomics of just like a voice memo. Or sometimes I'll just fire off a little text, and yeah, that's basically what I do when I'm on the go. Sometimes I'm also just like on my desktop and like open zone like a browser tab or something.
And I can't
Yes.
have a WhatsApp message with Zo today, right?
Not yet. You can have a Telegram message, but WhatsApp will be coming soon, hopefully. WhatsApp is a little tricky to support, but I think we'll figure out a way.
Yeah, I love WhatsApp for what it's worth. It's kind of become I'm moving
Yeah,
more and more of my texting conversations in there.
nice.
I think that's for me one of the struggles of like this modality too, of like just one thread for everything. Because I'm like, ooh,
Yeah,
like I just like
totally.
want to keep things separate. And
Yeah,
like a use case that I found is like for like the OpenClaw world is the just creating like a group chat with in Telegram and then just creating like sub conversations. That's been really,
yeah,
really useful because then I'm like, if I have different projects that I'm working on, then I can use
totally.
that. But yeah,
Yeah,
I think honestly, I think that's going to be a solved problem. Like I think it's just like a matter of like kind of you're almost like building the plane as it's flying a little bit.
yeah, exactly.
If you're enjoying this conversation, please check out the links in the show notes to support the podcast. Mark and I do this out of love, but to keep it going, we also need your support. Thanks, and now back to the episode.
A question that I ask myself too, like it's like what is going to be like the almost like let's I think probably we all here are in alignment that I don't know the exact timeline, but we're gonna live in a future where we're probably gonna like be interacting with multiple like computers in our day to day, right? I
Hmm.
almost imagine like we're gonna have like almost like our personal assistant that maybe help us handle our household, our errands. That's like kind of like more like firewalled into our personal life. Maybe has
Hmm.
some access to our work stuff and our work calendar, so we can coordinate. And maybe it's like one per family or one per person. But the one that I'm really interested in is like how do these computers like fit into like the workplace, right? Like because
Hmm.
is it like so I see like almost like different um potential like configurations. Like maybe everyone has like this like super smart assistant, and you know that's personalized to you and to your memory. But it could also be like actually no one the product team maybe shares one computer that has like the context of
Hmm.
the entire team, and they can all work with it, and it's actually
Hmm.
beneficial that they have that's like that they all are connected to it because they can kind of like update their memory and the projects, and it's like kind of like that connective tissue between the team. So I'm curious, like, and I'm sure you're probably experimenting with this internally with your team.
Yeah,
Like, what do you think things are going, and maybe like what are the pros and cons of these different models?
yeah, yeah. So I think there's actually prior art for this. So at many larger software companies, they have this thing called a remote dev environment, or at Stripe we call them dev boxes. So every engineer, in addition to like their physical laptop, they also are able to use dev boxes, which are like virtual cloud computers that are like spun up with all of the right context to like be productive in the development environment, in our case at Stripe, and just connected to all these useful things. Like everything is just set up perfectly. I think that will become the case for kind of everybody at a company now that everybody is somewhat technical or technically empowered. So I think this dev box concept becomes something that basically every employee uses. Like access work, and they can be kind of like provisioned in particular ways for particular employees. Even at Stripe, like dev boxes have like particular kind of like configuration flavors. And you can imagine that kind of like being much more expansive in the context of a company. Like different kind of roles have different like internal tools that they use. So I think you should be able to talk to somebody else's kind of machine with scope permissions. You should be able to like
Hmm.
not just ask questions of the context that's in there, but also sometimes like run stuff in that machine, like actually run code. And this gets back to kind of old school computing. So like back in the day, in like the 90s or like just the early days of like computing and the internet, it was a lot more peer to peer, and like people did things like FTP or like SSH to like work with another computer. I think all of those primitives are like really well put together and thought out. They're mostly used by engineers right now, but I think they will be revealed to like the wider population of computer users once everybody has these kinds of cloud machines or like internet connected machines that are always on. Yeah,
So just like you get set up with a new MacBook when you join a company, you might get set up with a new virtual computer.
yeah,
And do you think then people need to start thinking of like, what am I going to do on my MacBook? What am I going to do on my virtual computer? Or do you think over
Mm,
time the virtual computer just becomes like the default place to like do everything?
yeah. I think it at least becomes the default kind of location where things are stored, because it's kind of more accessible in that form, and also kind of more durable in a sense. And yeah, I think over time we can have much thinner clients. If we can use Chromebooks in the future and not have to pay for these like beefy machines that we kind of mostly do email on. Yeah,
It seems
Yeah.
to me like Google and Apple just like completely missed this because they like
yeah,
Google Drive obviously in a lot of ways is my virtual computer.
yeah,
It's like
totally.
the legacy virtual computer, and then iCloud is
Yeah,
another legacy virtual computer, or at least like
exactly.
storage device,
Yeah,
right? It seems
yeah,
like they completely missed this ability to add this interaction layer and this user experience layer around those computers.
totally.
Because now if I want to store something, like if I download a file, there's now like I have to think about where would I like to make use of this file? Like
Yeah,
is it just local? Do I want to access it from just my like iPhone for some reason? In which case I want to probably put it in Google Drive or an iCloud. Like I have iCloud desktop, obviously. Or
hmm,
do I want to be able to use some kind of AI agent to make use of that file or to access that file, in which case now I have to bring it into my virtual computer. And obviously if someone's using OpenClaw, they would have to take it from their regular computer and put it on, whatever their Mac Mini if they're using a Mac Mini for safety reasons. So there's like this overhead now of just thinking about where to put the context that you may or may not want to use later for things, right?
yeah, definitely.
Are you guys feeling that? Like, I feel like
Oh, for
Yeah,
like it's
sure.
an unexpected
no,
tax for me. I'm like
yeah,
on top of all these superpowers we're getting. I find that I have this like additional tax that I'm paying now by just having to think all the time of where to put stuff.
I mean,
definitely.
I think whoever figures out context as a service is going to make a lot of money, especially for like
Yeah,
B2B.
yeah. In a sense, Zoe is mostly meant to be not even this kind of AI thing, but really kind of like your kind of personal cloud, like kind of this central context layer that can connect to your different devices, and you can connect to different kind of apps that you might use. We have like an MCP that's very useful, so you can use Zoe from any kind of AI surface if you want to.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the hardest things to do right now if you are a power user of like any of the coding agents, right? Just
Mhm.
beyond like just the simple like Claude or ChatGPT, and you're like working on a complex repo. And it's like figuring out like, how do you architect your context system, right? Like,
Yeah,
what goes into
totally.
the global Claude.md file, what goes into the skill context, what goes into the actual project Claude.md file. And like, what are the rules to what something gets elevated to one thing or the other? And there's not really just good guidelines out there. So you just have to make this. So I think it's a very hard decision at the personal level, and
Yeah,
the complexity just keeps getting more and more difficult when you're actually working like that as a team. Because like
definitely.
now you're forced to articulate like, here's the system we're going to use it, which it's pretty hard, but it's doable. But then the next layer is like, how do you actually enforce it and kind of um, share that judgment with everyone in the company to make sure that they're making the right call. And sometimes it's not black and white, like it's a little bit of an spectrum. So I really think like totally feel that. And it's just, it takes a lot of like mental energy.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that's similar to that people are feeling right now and is I think you need to get very good at like building the muscle of like what can you delegate. And I think part of what can you delegate is like part of it is like that self-awareness of like, hey, like here's everything that I'm doing and here's something that I think it's not
Hmm.
high leverage. It's like that
Yeah.
intuition and that judgment. But I think the other part is also like understanding like the capabilities of like your quote unquote employees, right? Or the tools that you have access to, right? And like
Hmm.
maybe we can delegate to Zo is very different. They can delegate to maybe like Codex or Claude
Yeah.
Code. So I think that's like another
Definitely.
like just really valuable skill right now.
Yeah.
That I think if you're honing it, you can start to work in a very leveraged way.
Yeah. Yeah. I really agree with that. I think like, yeah, the best skill is kind of like understanding like what the frontier is, which is very jagged, as people say, in terms of like what is possible, or even like what will just be really easy to do. It's like some things that are so easy to do that you can kind of one shot it, as they say, instead of like writing a task in the backlog. You should just prompt something to do it immediately, and that's been kind of like a big shift for me over the last kind of like several months. Is like much more instead of like writing a to do or a task in linear, I'll just prompt something to do it and then I'll follow up with that later. Because the point of a to do or a task was always just to like kind of create this like context for later. And that context could also just be like the work itself that you can kind of review.
Yeah.
Wait, so
I mean,
just to make sure I'm following that, do you guys not use like a linear type system to build Zo?
We used to use linear less and less so. Now, much more, we are just directly firing off prompts or like, we're coordinating in Slack and we have like lots of like inbound of like things to do. And then often, often we will just like prompt something and they get a PR as like kind of like the task essentially. And we can kind of like track that and iterate on it.
So do you have a Zo agent present inside of Slack?
We do. You can also, well, often we're just kind of firing off tasks in our own setups, not directly from Slack as much, but yeah, you can integrate so with Slack, which can be useful as well. We're still figuring out like how we want to use that bot, but yeah,
So
I
the
do.
same way
Yeah.
So the same way Mark and I, because we collaborate on podcasts and also another business called
Hmm.
Insider Loops together. But like
Yeah.
we'll be in a Slack thread or WhatsApping each other, and some kind of to do will come out of that. And then
Yeah.
if it's quick to do, we might just do it then. But if it's like a later thing, we'll put it in Asana because that's kind of where
Yeah.
Mark used to work there, and we have a lot of our templates and stuff already built up there. So it
Very
sounds
cool.
like in a world where we were fully like AI pilled
Yeah.
for like the new way of doing like task
Yeah.
management or whatever, I might like chat with Mark about something and message my, my virtual computer to like create a
Yeah.
task for me to do it. And it'll just remind me, it'll just like understand the context of like, I want you to remind me to do this thing, or like, I need to do this thing
Hmm.
later. And it'll
Yep.
be like, cool, like I'll remind you. And so therefore like the atomic unit of like a to-do task that lives in like a task management system is maybe not is not needed in a future where you could basically just have the collective set of these tasks and their respective like statuses, I guess, like centralized in a single place.
Yeah.
Or are you just rebuilding like a
It's
Kanban board
yeah,
like in your own
totally.
cloud?
Yeah, it's worth riffing on. I don't think project management is going anywhere. I think it's very useful to like kind of think about things in a structured way and like kind of break down big projects into subtasks. But I guess there's some work that's like more like kind of interrupt driven or kind of more like, kind of ad hoc or spontaneous. I think those things often went into like kind of a never ending backlog for me or like a big to do list. Now I try to like, I guess, just take things off of that backlog immediately, or like kind of move them into like kind of a in progress state just by kind of like prompting something like, either my coding agent or Zo, to kind of like take a first pass at it at least and kind of come back to that thread later.
Got it.
So
Mark, sorry, just one more question, then I want to hear what you want to ask. But I just wanted to
yeah.
clarify, it's been in the back of my mind. Are you still using an IDE like Cursor, or are you like building Zo in Zo?
Yeah, I do some of my coding in Zo actually now. Zo is a really nice kind of like, I guess like background web agent, which is like a part of like, I think the tool belt of coders nowadays. Like there are things like Claude Code in the web or like Cursor Web. We basically want to be able to like fire off like kind of like pretty simple tests in an environment where like you don't have to like kind of be there with your laptop open. So that's kind of like a way that I use Zo. But I also use a mix of all the other tools. I still like Cursor for various reasons, and I like Claude Code for some other things. So I try to like use a mix of different tools. Yeah. And I guess like the reason I use so many tools is I think like the number of things I can do at once has increased a lot, and I kind of like to use different tools for each type of thing. Yeah,
Yeah, I would definitely want to go back to that, but
yeah,
but I think that's probably like another kind of topic altogether.
yeah,
Just in general, like I'm very curious how you spend your time, especially given
yeah,
that you were an
totally.
engineer. But
Yeah,
I do want to close the loop on this like new paradigm for project management. So just to make sure that I understand it, right? So it sounds like in the past, kind of your point of view was that it's helpful to have something like Linear or a project management tool to capture all the like little small things. And like part of it was just capturing all the small things and having a backlog. And then when you had some
hmm,
bandwidth, like you were tackling them off. And now the whole point
yeah,
is like, because you have almost like this infinite leverage, right? Through Zo or whatever other tools you're using, it's actually just way faster to just like fire them off and get them
yeah,
done. So there's no really, it's just a waste of time to capture
exactly.
um,
Yeah,
the work,
Unless
right?
you're
And then
not
I
sure
think,
you want to do it yet, right?
right, unless
yeah,
you're sure,
exactly.
exactly. But then at
Yeah,
that point, you
yeah,
maybe take a note, be like, hey, this is more of
yeah,
a decision rather than a task.
totally.
Um,
Yeah,
and then what it sounds like that you still think that project management is helpful is when you have like a big task, right? Let's say like, hey, we're
yeah,
doing a new feature, or maybe like even back in the day, right, when you did the big pivot, right? It's like, hey, like
yeah,
we probably need to sequence this work into phases, and we need to
totally.
capture exactly like kind of like what are the how we're progressing on different phases, and kind of like breaking down the work into like sub or tasks or
Yeah,
issues. So it sounds like that latter part of like breaking down big projects, you're still bought in. The one that you're kind of like, actually, there's no really point on tracking is more on like the smaller like paper cuts
yeah,
that you're spread across everything. Is that a
yeah.
good
That's right.
representation of it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Makes sense. And then how do you track whether, what is the system of record where you know what has been done and what hasn't, right? Because then it's like, like, because I think that's something that I always think about, oh,
Mm.
like, wait, like I cannot remember if this was done or not. Like, how do you solve for that problem?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the code base is the best system of record at a software company. So that that is like what most of the tasks kind of boil down to. If it has been done or not, kind of like it's represented in the code base itself. We have a mono repo, which makes things easier to track as well, and we have a lot of kind of like internal context and like notes and stuff in our code base. I like personally, I just like to like not have too many places that I'm looking. So basically, just the code base and Slack for me. And I don't really like to look in other places. We do use Linear sometimes, but mostly I like to kind of just have like a single source of truth, like kind of these more ephemeral conversations, which are sometimes linked to like code based work.
So
Makes sense.
you can push, you can basically read and push to your mono repo directly from Zo because you connect it. Are you guys using
Yep, that's
GitHub?
right.
Okay.
We are using GitHub. Yeah, yeah,
So if you're ever not sure, like theoretically, you could just text Zo and ask, like,
exactly. Yeah,
did this get done?
yeah,
And you could maybe even build like a skill that tells Zo when I ask you what got done, you build a skill that's like the give me the
yeah,
update, the status update skill, and
exactly.
then
Yeah,
like it'll answer, and then it'll also give you its rationale for like why it gave you that answer. And if it can point to any commits that actually relate to what you're asking about, it can be like, this is the commit in which it happened, or you can kind of
yeah,
design your workflow for how you want that to happen.
exactly. No, that's totally right. I actually have something very much like that. As like kind of a product owner, a product manager, engineering manager, you just need to have like really good oversight over everything that's happening. We have this kind of product updates page on our website where like users can look to like see product updates. That's entirely generated by Zo. And the process of it generating that is actually really useful for me as like kind of a manager on the team, because Zo will like kind of analyze everything that's happened in our repo in the last day, and we'll put together these updates. Some of them will be user facing and we'll mark those as such and like link the pull request. Some of them won't be. They'll be like kind of smaller bug fixes that I still want to know about. So those are also in this kind of like large log of events that we now have that like Zo adds to every day. And that's incredibly useful for me. And it's like the jumping off point for like kind of other things I might want to do.
Very
Your
cool.
Zo.computer website was built entirely in Zo.
No, well, like
Okay.
partially in Zo, I guess, but the updates page there, Zo.computer
Yeah.
/ updates, that is entirely generated by Zo. Yeah,
Cool. Okay. Got it. So
yeah,
you can carve out like subdomains and build them as like, wherever you want to build them, or like sub pages within the website and build them with different Like you can have Codex build one page, you can have Claude Code build a different page, you can have Zo build a
Yeah.
page. There's nothing.
Yeah,
stopping you from doing
totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Or you can
Yeah,
have all of them collaborating in the same page.
totally.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I think like
Yeah.
the permutations are kind of endless here.
Yeah,
Or
totally.
yeah, I think if it's cool with you, Ben E, I'm I'm just fascinated about how people are spending their time these days.
Yeah, let's.
Because like
Yeah.
I was very excited when you teed that up. I'll let you ask it,
Yeah.
but I'm also kind of very curious
yeah,
to go in there.
and maybe let's start by like, are you sure? Like, let's start by you sharing a little bit more. Like, of course, you're the Zo founder / co-founder of this company you're building. But what are your areas of responsibility in the company? And then, like, on a normal week, like, what does your week look like? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And maybe like, if you want to just contrast it with maybe like what were you doing like 2 years ago?
Yeah,
I find that like diff very interesting. So
totally. Yeah. So I started my career as an engineer, eventually became more of an engineering manager. And that's kind of where I was about 2.5 years ago when we started Zo. I decided to leave Stripe to do this startup. Doing a startup is crazy. Like, kind of every week is very different from the last one. But really up until quite recently, I was basically coding mostly while doing kind of like some more go-to-market type stuff. But the bulk of my work has always been coding. And even now, I still try to kind of like get a lot of coding done. It's much easier nowadays than it used to be to like be pretty like fragmented in your attention, but to like still get stuff done because I think the work of coding now it feels more like kind of like managing like a team in a sense. And you're kind of like firing off things, checking on them later. And it's all about kind of like just specifying things clearly and precisely in the same way that you would if you're like talking to a human member of your team. Sometimes I use like a little more specification working with agents these days because you have to be pretty clear about what you want to do. But yeah, I usually have, I guess like when I'm like at peak productivity, like when I'm really locked in for a day and like don't have that many meetings, I usually have like somewhere between like 4 to 8 different things going on, kind of just different agent tasks running at a time that I will like hop between. And usually there will be like one main thing that is like part of like my big project of the day that is really taking like most of my attention. And then I have like these kind of side quests that I'm also doing. And those side quests are like similar to the work of like, checking Slack or checking our community Discord. They're just like things that I monitor and sometimes like respond to.
I'm curious. So okay, so it sounds like for you, like being locked in seems like your ability to be able to do like 8 things at once, and let's call it like maybe like a 2-hour block, right? Where you're all of a
Yeah.
sudden, and can you get me into like before you started that block, like what is like that headspace you're in where you like choose
Mm.
like what are those 8 things that you're gonna do? Like, is it like do you have like a to do somewhere? Do you have like a goal for the day, and then you just and then you like or do you have like constant windows that you have open because there are like things that you should always be doing? Like yeah, like help me get into like how do those 8 windows or 8 tasks get into your screen? And yeah,
Yeah. It's a good question. Yeah. We have a great team. So it's still quite small, but I think everybody has like kind of their different like areas of expertise. And I have my own, I think, as well. So like there are some tasks that like I kind of want to claim for myself and just like carve out time to work on. So usually my like work blocks are like centered around like kind of one main task that I will do. But like while I'm in that work mode on this like kind of one main task that usually the main tasks are characterized, I think, by like just requiring more iteration and kind of like maybe like just design or like they just like require more human in the loop, I guess, to like really get it done to like
what's
a
an
degree
example of one that you did
yeah,
recently?
totally. I think uh, trying to think of the most recent one. Recently, we've been doing some work on just like kind of making the UI kind of every element of the UI kind of like more visible to the agent. And so like it's a goal of ours to make it so that like everything that the human can do in the Zo UI, like clicking around, is also accessible to the agent as a tool.
Oh, amazing!
And
As a user, that's music to
yeah,
my ears. Yeah, keep going.
nice.
Yeah.
So I did a big pass that I had wanted to do for a while. It was a big yak shave of like basically like representing the whole UI in a way to the agent. And like that also had a side effect of making the kind of front end itself like much more, I guess, like declarative and easy to reason about. So it had all these like really nice consequences that just required me like kind of going down all these like kind of threads. And it was like very satisfying in the end. But it took a bunch of doing. So that's an example of like one of these like larger tasks that just takes a lot of focus.
By the way, when you're doing that as the founder, do you need to, so like, for example, like when Mark and I are working on something, if I want to push an update to our website and that I just vibe coded, I don't necessarily have to like check with him. I'll do it and then I'll just like update him after, be like, I did this thing. Is that kind of how you do it too? Like, are you optimizing for speed, just trying to get it out and then updating everyone on what happened? Or do you try to like get people to like chime in and approve or give feedback, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it really depends. I think we are a very high trust team. So I think we have set the expectation that like anybody can just merge, but you should kind of ask for review if you're not sure about a decision. And I think we're pretty clear on like what those things are. Like, large user facing changes should definitely be reviewed and discussed. But many things are just like, unarguably just like better. And we just ship those as fast as possible. Definitely optimizing for velocity.
And in terms of the product process, are you still kind of like writing like a PRD, then like creating some like mocks to like get the feel for it and then building it? And like, what is the, like if you're going to like allocate, like, let's say like, it's like 100 points to get the whole thing done. Like how much points are you allocating to like the planning and prototyping versus like the actual building? Like what are you spending most of your time?
It's a good question. So we're a very engineering focused team, but I think the way that we engineer has become kind of more PM or like kind of engineering manager like. So like we've always been big proponents since the very beginning of like kind of a planning and then implementing process. So like the first step of any large feature is to like have the AI write a plan and just iterate on that plan, and it becomes something like a PRD or a spec for that feature. And that's something that we can kind of like share as a team, just like share that markdown doc in Slack and like discuss it. And that's often a really good chat point. Both personally, or like in kind of solo mode, or kind of in team mode. And also, those plans kind of get checked into our repo, so like we can always refer back to them for reference on kind of what was done. Yeah, so a very big proponent of this like plan mode. I think we were doing this in a manual way before plan mode was introduced in kind of all of the tools, and we stick to our kind of like manual approach, which is just a markdown doc, because there's various benefits when you kind of like own the process more about how you want the plans to look, and like all these different like specifics about the planning process that like are probably like pretty personal to you or the team.
What tool are you using for that planning process? Because it sounds like you have different tools for different parts of the process.
We just have a skill, and skills work in all of the tools now. And it's just a planning skill. Yeah, it's quite straightforward. It just produces a markdown doc in a particular place in our code base, the plans folder, and every person on the team has a different folder for their plans or subfolder, and they're responsible for like organizing their plans however they want. But sometimes they poke around into their plans, and it's quite useful to just like see how they're thinking about things or see what's been done. I really like the planning process, and especially the more DIY planning process where you kind of take more ownership over it, because I think it's pretty central to the work.
And out of those 100 points that we talked about, like, from start to finish, right? And maybe incorporating like the back and forth with the team. Like, are we talking about like 40 points? Are we talking 60 points? Like,
Yeah. It's definitely over 50. It's pretty high. I think like the AI is quite good once you have a really well fleshed out plan. I would say that like for many tests, it's like 70% of my time is in the planning phase. And then it just flows out from the plan, because the plan kind of like just describes everything that needs to be done anyway.
Can I ask you kind of like concretely how you get feedback on that plan? And then we could start maybe wrapping up, because I know we,
Totally.
that this flew by the way.
Yeah.
I just want to ask, like, so if the plan is like a markdown file in the repo and you guys communicate on a daily basis in Slack, what is the mechanism through which you try to get feedback on a markdown file plan?
Yeah, maybe can I add something like a follow up there too?
Totally.
Like, this is very much like a pain point that Ben and I have, because we also operate out of pain. And like, for example, like something that we wish we could do is like, for example, if there's like a line that we don't like in the plan, or like a goal, like a bullet that we don't like,
right?
We don't have a way to like highlight that in the markdown and add a comment. So basically, like what we end up doing sometimes, we take the markdown file, we put it into Google Drive, then we convert it into that, then we comment. So I'm curious, like if you have any better workflow for that. Is that where you're going, Ben?
Yes,
got it. Yeah. So for our plans, they happen to be in our repo. So often we will just kind of tell the AI like make a pull request, assign this person, and then you have a PR that you kind of like link to and comment on line by line. So that's kind of like how we collaborate, at least in our code
Oh,
changes
so the
on
plan is like
plans.
a PR, or like each update to the plan gets like a new commit on a PR or something like that?
Yeah, so like all PRs start out with a plan, or like all complex features, I guess, start out with a plan. And you can just have the PR that's just the plan if you want to like review that before kind of moving forward. Yeah,
Oh wow,
And
that's
so the person that's reviewing the plan PR is reviewing it the way they would review any other code changes. They're basically pulling it up,
exactly. Yep.
just literally like reviewing it and then leaving comments on what needs to change about it, which is
Yeah.
like, can we agree that's heavier than commenting on a Google Doc, making updates in a Google Doc, and then just like replacing the markdown with where you land? Like it feels a little, it feels heavier to me, right?
I think you're asking the wrong person, Ben.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, like I'm always in GitHub, so it's like not very happy at all. But yeah,
True,
yeah,
true.
Like I think if you're a PM,
If
like
you're a PM,
100%, I'm like, yeah,
yeah,
like, but I'm
yeah.
like, wait, like Ben probably like that was his job at Stripe, right? Like
Right.
all like
Yeah.
big part of his job is literally reviewing PRs, and actually
Yeah.
like he probably likes
Totally.
it better because like
which
he
now
knows
I
the
have
ins and outs.
to.
Yeah.
Now it's like as part of rewiring how I work. I'm asking myself like, is the way I review work, is that something that should
Mhm.
change? Because if I'm like, obviously like updating a markdown file is a very concrete example, but if shifting more of our work into like working like developers in that sense would help us to move faster, then obviously it's something we could talk about. But um, well, we should definitely do a part two once you have. I know you have some exciting
Yeah.
news
Would love
in
to.
coming weeks
Yeah.
and months to talk
Yeah.
about, and maybe we'll have you back on once the dust has settled from some of the exciting things you're going to talk about. But as we kind of start wrapping up here, first of all, I want to say a big thank you for taking the time to chat with us and for building what I think is definitely my favorite new product of the year so
Amazing.
far. Like
Thank
just
you.
as a fanboy from the side, and I'm
And
really
I'm
excited
I'm
to.
excited to use it. I think Benny has been pushing me to use it.
Amazing.
He's been very successful in getting me to use products, and I think after this conversation, I'm even more excited to use it. Part of it too is like I've just been trying to do like my own thing, and it's extremely frustrating and slow. So I'm like, okay, like I don't know why I'm torturing myself that way. And so yeah, I'm just really excited to try
Oh
it,
yeah.
and next time I have it, I'll probably have been more questions. So yeah, I'm pumped.
Amazing.
I mean, I've basically been, just so you know, Ben, like every time someone's like raving to me about OpenClaw or like why they're excited to play with it and their new Mac Mini, I throw out there like, can you like tell me one thing that can do that I can't do with Zo, right? And it's kind of like when everyone was like excited about Web3 or whatever, and
Yeah.
they're like, all these like DAOs and stuff. I'm like, cool, but like, what can that do that we couldn't do before? Like,
Right.
and I think a lot of the use cases were failing for me. So I generally like the simpler. I'm not. This is a compliment to you,
Yeah.
but I do
Yeah.
think Zo is a
Appreciate it.
simpler way of doing this stuff than
Totally.
some.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay, so we're gonna do two quick questions, and then we'll do gratitude corner and let you go. So, first question is: if people want to hear more about what you're thinking about these days or what's on your mind, where would you send them to kind of learn more? And then, secondly, how can the audience be helpful to you?
So first, go to zo.computer. You'll find lots of links to our blog and ways that we're thinking about the product. I have a Twitter, which you may find as well if you stick around. But yeah, in terms of like being helpful to us, we are actually growing our team. It's a very small team. We have 3 engineers, but I think that's one way that people can be very helpful. So hiring product engineers, infra engineers, and also kind of non-technical folks as well, probably more on the support side and the growth side. So looking for really excellent folks that especially have like former startup experience for that.
And that's in in the Brooklyn office, or are you also hiring anywhere else?
Yeah, so hiring Brooklyn, and we're also planning to establish a probably small presence in San Francisco. Yeah,
Cool.
Cool.
And
Amazing.
then, okay, so that covers both how they could learn more about what you're thinking about. You also have a LinkedIn that I see you've been more
yeah,
active on, so we can link
that's
to
right.
that in the show notes too. And then go check out the Zo.computer website. And then our very last question for you, last but not least, is we call this gratitude corner. So you've had a really awesome journey to this point in your career. You don't need us to tell you that. But, lots of exciting things ahead as well. And, Mark and I like to take some time at the end of the conversation. If there's any one person or even multiple people who you would like to maybe thank for the role that they've played in your journey so far. We'd just love to hear about them and give them a shout out for the impact they had.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Tiff, my girlfriend. The journey of being a founder is very hard, as you know, and I've been very busy. And Tiff has been amazingly supportive through all of us through these long 2.5 years. So supportive that she's even contracting to help us out on the growth side, which has been just through the kindness of her heart. But she actually has a lot of great talent there, so it's been very useful. Hopefully, we will hire somebody though. So please help me hire somebody to replace my girlfriend. That would be really awesome. But yeah, that's the main thank you. Yeah.
Amazing.
I love it.
Yeah, we'll save your relationship by finding an amazing go-to-market person to take Zo to the next level.
Please.
Man, this has been so fun. I cannot believe an hour has gone by. Yeah, I wish we had 2 more hours. But Benny, you're also awesome. But Benji, yeah, that was so much fun.
Yeah, lots of
Kudos
fun.
to all you've done. And yeah, thank you for the time.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. That's a wrap.
Cool.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.